My name's Simone Kessler, I'm 27, and I want to start with the phone call that made me realize I hadn't had health insurance for 3 months without knowing it. Hi, this is Priya, calling from Falcon Crest Travel, just confirming the final payment for the Kessler Honeymoon package. I have a note here that the remaining balance was supposed to come from a family contribution account, and I just wanted to double-check the routing details before we finalize everything. I sat there for a second, completely confused. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong Kessler. I didn't book anything with a travel agency. Oh, she said, sounding a little flustered. My apologies. I have Simone Kessler listed as a contact on this account. Let me look again. That's when she read me a description of the trip. 10 days in the Maldives, overwater bungalow, a specific dollar amount that made my stomach turn because I recognized it immediately. Though not from anything related to a honeymoon. It was almost exactly the same amount my parents had told me 3 months earlier. They simply didn't have available to keep paying for my health insurance premium. Okay, let me back up because none of that makes sense yet without the full picture. I have a chronic autoimmune condition, diagnosed at 22, right after college, something that requires ongoing medication and regular specialist visits to keep manageable. Not life-threatening if properly treated, but genuinely dangerous if I go without care for any real stretch of time. My parents had been helping me cover the premium for a supplemental health plan for the past 2 years, since my regular job's insurance didn't fully cover the specialists I need, and the gap was more than I could handle alone on my salary as a middle school teacher. 3 months before that travel agent's call, my mother sat me down and told me, with what seemed like real regret at the time, that they simply couldn't keep contributing to my premium anymore. Money was tight, she said. Unexpected expenses had come up. They were sorry, but I'd need to figure something else out. I believed her. I want to be honest about that, because it matters for understanding how blindsided I felt later. I didn't question it. I scrambled instead, dropped down to a cheaper, less comprehensive plan, started rationing some of my specialist visits more than I probably should have, telling myself it was temporary, that I'd figure out a better solution eventually. What I didn't know, what that accidental phone call from Priya at Falcon Crest Travel revealed, was that during those exact same 3 months, my parents had been quietly funneling money into a 10-day honeymoon package for my younger sister, Odette, and her new husband. A trip that, based on the numbers Priya read off to me before catching her mistake, cost almost exactly what they'd told me they could no longer afford to keep contributing toward my insurance. But you need the family background first, or this whole thing won't make sense the way it actually played out. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the older of 2 daughters. My parents, Ron and Patrice Kessler, ran a small accounting firm together for almost 30 years. Moderately successful, comfortable, never wealthy, but never struggling either, at least not visibly. My sister Odette is 3 years younger than me. Growing up, Odette was the golden child in that specific, quiet way some families operate without ever saying it directly. She was more social, more conventionally successful in the ways my parents seemed to value most: homecoming court, a sorority in college, a marketing job right out of school that came with a title that sounded impressive at family gatherings. I was quieter, more academic, went into teaching, which my parents always described to relatives with a slight, almost apologetic edge, like it needed some kind of justification attached. My diagnosis at 22 changed the family dynamic in a way I didn't fully appreciate until much later. Suddenly, I wasn't just the quieter, less flashy daughter. I was also the daughter with ongoing medical needs, something that, in hindsight, I think my parents experienced less as concern and more as an inconvenience they hadn't budgeted for, emotionally or financially. They helped at first, genuinely, when the diagnosis was new and scary. But over the years, I noticed the help came with more and more reluctance, more sighing, more comments about how expensive my situation was compared to Odette's, who, conveniently, never needed anything from them beyond the normal support any young adult might ask for occasionally. Odette got engaged about a 1.5 years before all this happened, to a genuinely nice guy named Julian who worked in software sales. The wedding itself was a big production, paid for mostly by my parents, which I didn't resent at the time, honestly, because that's a pretty normal thing for parents to help with, and Odette's wedding wasn't wildly excessive, all things considered. The honeymoon, though, that's where things started getting complicated in ways I didn't understand until much later. About 4 months before my parents told me they could no longer help with my insurance premium, I remember Odette mentioning, casually, at a family dinner, that she and Julian were hoping to do something big for their honeymoon, but that money was tight after the wedding expenses. I didn't think much of it at the time, just normal post-wedding financial stress, the kind lots of newly married couples go through. 3 months later, my mother sat me down and delivered the news about my insurance contribution ending. I remember the conversation clearly. We were in her kitchen, and she had this careful, rehearsed quality to her voice that I recognize now, looking back, as the sound of someone who'd already decided something and was just delivering the conclusion rather than actually discussing it with me. "Things have gotten tight," she said. "Your father's business had a slow quarter. We need to pull back on some of our monthly contributions, and unfortunately, that includes your insurance premium." I asked how tight, whether this was permanent or temporary, whether there was anything I could do to help make up the difference myself, if it was just a rough patch. "We're not sure yet," she said. "Let's just say for now, you'll need to handle the premium on your own going forward." I didn't argue much. I've never been great at pushing back against my parents. Honestly, something I've had to work on in therapy over the years, this instinct to just accept whatever explanation I'm given rather than asking harder questions. I switched to a cheaper plan, one with a higher deductible and less specialist coverage, and I told myself I'd manage. 3 months after that conversation, Priya called me by mistake. I sat there on the phone with her, feeling something cold spreading slowly through my chest, as she read off the details of the trip before catching her error. 10 days in the Maldives. Overwater bungalow. A specific dollar figure, just under $14,000, that lined up almost exactly with what my parents claimed they could no longer afford to put toward my health insurance. "I'm so sorry," Priya said, once she realized her mistake. "I must have the wrong contact information on file. Please disregard that call." I thanked her, hung up, and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, just staring at nothing, doing math in my head that kept adding up to the same uncomfortable conclusion. I want to be careful here, because I know coincidences happen, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions without understanding the full picture first. So I did some digging, quietly, over the following week. The way you do when you suspect something, but aren't ready yet to blow up a relationship over an assumption that might turn out to be wrong. I called Odette first, casually, just asking about honeymoon planning, trying to get a sense of the actual timeline and whether my instinct about the money was even plausible. "Oh my gosh, yes," she said, sounding genuinely excited. "Mom and Dad are helping us out with it, actually. They said they wanted to do something really special for us since the wedding, and honestly, we couldn't have afforded the Maldives on our own. It's basically a dream trip," I asked when the planning had actually started, trying to keep my voice casual. "Probably like 4 months ago," she said. "Right after the wedding, once we started looking at honeymoon options and realized how expensive everything actually was. 4 months ago, that lined up almost exactly with when Odette had first mentioned financial tightness at that family dinner, which was also right around a month before my parents told me they could no longer help with my insurance. I still didn't have full proof of anything at that point, just a very uncomfortable overlap in timing. So I did something I probably should have done from the start, honestly, instead of just accepting my mother's explanation the first time around. I asked my father directly, in a separate conversation, specifically about the business slowdown they'd mentioned as the reason for cutting my insurance help. "Dad, you mentioned things got tight because of a slow quarter at the firm," I said. "Can you tell me more about that? I'm just trying to understand the full situation since it affects my medical care pretty directly." He got oddly evasive, which itself told me something, since my dad's usually pretty straightforward about business matters, happy to talk numbers and specifics when asked. "It's complicated," he said. "Just some cash flow issues. Nothing to worry about long term." "Okay," I said. "But specifically, was there an actual slow quarter? Or were funds allocated somewhere else?" There was a long pause. Long enough that I knew, before he even answered, that I'd caught something real. "Simone, we wanted to do something nice for your sister," he said finally. "The wedding took more out of savings than we expected, And honestly, we thought the honeymoon would mean more to her right now than continuing your insurance contribution would mean to you, since you already have some coverage through your job anyway. I sat with that for a long moment, feeling something harden inside me that had been soft and trusting just moments before. You used the money you told me you couldn't afford for my insurance, I said slowly, making sure I understood it correctly, to pay for Odette's honeymoon instead. It's not that black and white, he started. It's actually exactly that black and white, I said. You told me business was slow. That wasn't true. You had the money. You just decided Odette's trip mattered more than my medication access. He didn't have a good response to that. I don't think he'd ever actually said it out loud to himself in those terms before. The stark reality of choosing one daughter's vacation over the other daughter's healthcare. I confronted my mother next, and this conversation was harder, honestly, because she cried almost immediately, which made it difficult to stay focused on the actual issue, instead of getting pulled into managing her emotions the way I'd been trained to do my whole life. We didn't think of it that way, she said, tears already starting. We just wanted to give Odette something special. You still have insurance through your job, Simone. You're not completely without coverage. I have a plan with a deductible so high I've been skipping specialist visits for 3 months, I said, because you told me you couldn't afford to help anymore. Except you could afford it. You just chose not to spend it on me. That's not fair, she said. We help you plenty in other ways. Name one specific way you've helped me in the last 3 months, I said. The same 3 months you were funding a $14,000 honeymoon. She couldn't, actually. She sat there, crying, unable to name a single specific thing, because there wasn't one. The help had simply stopped, redirected entirely toward Odette's trip, without any actual financial crisis requiring that redirection. I want to walk you through what happened medically during those 3 months, because I think it matters for understanding why this wasn't just about hurt feelings over money, though obviously that was part of it too. With the cheaper insurance plan, I skipped 2 specialist appointments I would normally have kept, telling myself I could manage symptoms with over-the-counter options in the meantime. During that gap, my condition flared up worse than it had in almost 2 years, bad enough that I ended up in urgent care one weekend, unable to reach my actual specialist quickly enough through the new, more limited plan. The urgent care visit alone cost me almost $800 out of pocket, money I wouldn't have needed to spend at all if I'd maintained my original coverage. That's the part that made this feel less like a simple family unfairness story and more like something with actual, tangible consequences. My health had genuinely suffered, medically, measurably, because my parents redirected money toward a vacation instead of being honest with me about their actual priorities. I didn't confront Odette directly at first, honestly, because I didn't think this was really her fault, in the way it was clearly my parents' fault. She hadn't lied to me about anything. She'd simply accepted a generous gift from our parents, the way anyone might, without necessarily knowing the specific trade-off being made behind the scenes. But eventually, about 2 weeks after everything came out into the open with my parents, I did talk to her, mostly because I felt like she deserved to understand the situation clearly, rather than hearing some distorted version through our parents later. I found out the honeymoon money came at the expense of my health insurance, I told her, keeping my voice as neutral as I could manage. I'm not saying you did anything wrong by accepting help from Mom and Dad, but I think you should know what that help actually cost, on my end. Odette was quiet for a long moment, and then, to her credit, she seemed genuinely shaken by what I told her. I had no idea, she said. They told us they'd been saving up separately for this, that it wasn't affecting anything else. I would never have accepted it if I'd known it meant you went without coverage. I believe her, actually. I don't think Odette orchestrated any of this, or even fully understood what our parents were doing behind the scenes. I think, much like a lot of these situations, she simply existed inside a family dynamic that had always tilted toward giving her more without much scrutiny, and it took a direct, specific comparison for her to actually see the shape of that dynamic clearly for the first time. Here's what I decided to do, once I had the full picture, because I want to be honest that this wasn't really about revenge in the dramatic sense. It was about making sure something like this couldn't just quietly happen again without consequences attached to it. I sat down with both my parents together, a conversation I asked for specifically, rather than letting it happen informally the way most hard conversations in my family tended to happen, usually getting deflected or minimized before they could actually resolve anything. I laid out the medical costs I'd incurred during those 3 months, the specific urgent care bill, the flare-up that a specialist later confirmed was very likely connected to the gap in consistent treatment. I told them I wasn't asking them to fund my insurance indefinitely going forward, because honestly, at that point, I didn't want to be financially dependent on people who'd shown me exactly how easily that dependency could be redirected without warning, based on which daughter's needs felt more appealing to prioritize in the moment. What I did ask for was direct reimbursement for the specific medical costs their decision had caused, the urgent care bill, and the difference in premium costs over those 3 months, totaling just under $2,000. Not the full honeymoon cost. Not some dramatic financial settlement, just an acknowledgement, in actual dollars, of the specific harm their dishonesty had caused. My father agreed almost immediately, I think out of genuine guilt, once the medical details were laid out clearly in front of him. My mother took longer, still trying, for a while, to reframe the situation as me being unnecessarily dramatic about something that, in her mind, was really just a difficult financial choice they'd had to make as parents. "Every family has to prioritize sometimes," she said. "It doesn't mean we love you any less." "I'm not asking you to prove you love me," I said. "I'm asking you to stop lying to me about your actual finances and to understand that when you choose one daughter's vacation over the other daughter's medication access, that has real consequences, not just hurt feelings." She eventually agreed to the reimbursement too, though I think, even now, some part of her still doesn't fully understand why this mattered as much as it did to me, beyond the actual dollar amount involved. I want to tell you what changed after all this, because I think that matters more than the initial confrontation itself. I went back to my original, more comprehensive insurance plan within a month, using savings I'd been building for something else entirely, a decision that set back some other plans I'd had, but that felt necessary after everything that happened. I haven't asked my parents for financial help with anything since, not because I'm trying to punish them exactly, but because I genuinely don't trust, anymore, that whatever they tell me about their finances is actually accurate, or that their support won't just quietly disappear again the moment something more appealing comes along. My relationship with Odette actually improved, somewhat, through all of this, strangely enough. She's made a real effort since then to actually check in on my health specifically, asks about appointments, remembers details about my condition that she genuinely never used to pay attention to before. I think finding out what her honeymoon actually cost, in ways she never intended or wanted, changed something in how she sees our family dynamic too. My relationship with my parents is more distant now, honestly, more transactional, in a way that makes me sad sometimes, thinking about what it used to feel like before I understood how easily their support could be redirected without any real conversation about it. We still talk. We still see each other at holidays, but something fundamental shifted. The trust that used to exist underneath the surface pleasantries, and I don't think that fully comes back just because they eventually reimburse $2,000 in medical costs. It's been about 8 months now since that accidental phone call from Priya. My health has stabilized again, back on proper treatment, no more flare-ups since I switched back to comprehensive coverage. I think about that call sometimes, how close I came to never actually understanding what happened during those 3 months, just accepting my parents' explanation about a slow business quarter and never questioning it further. Priya has no idea, obviously, what that one misdialed call actually revealed. She was just doing her job, confirming payment details, reading off information she assumed was going to the right person. But that small, accidental mix-up ended up showing me something about my own family that I probably needed to see clearly, even though I never would have gone looking for it on my own, and even though part of me almost wishes, some days, that I never had to know it all. That's really the whole story, when I sit back and look at it honestly. Not some big dramatic reveal in a courtroom, no screaming match caught on camera. Just a wrong number, a specific dollar amount that happened to match up too perfectly to be coincidence, and a family that had to finally have an honest conversation about what it actually means when you tell one daughter you can't afford to keep her healthy, while quietly funding another daughter's dream vacation with the exact same money. I think that's the most honest way I can put it.